Okay, we are going to be talking about the magical world of UTM parameters. Um, so this can be a confusing topic because I think the biggest reason why people have questions about this all the time is because there's not a lot of clarity as far as like what they are, why they're important. So we're going to start there. It's essentially just a way to track information. So before we even get into what a UTM is, how to build them, how to look for things in Google Analytics, I actually want to start with like some basic like coding language stuff to give a very like how and why background. I recommended this before, but I really do recommend that everyone go through the Code Academy courses at some point. For, in particular, HTML. CSS is like interesting, kind of helpful, not like totally relevant, but HTML and JavaScript are really, really helpful to learn in this field, in any field. These are very, very relevant coding languages. And Code Academy is an awesome website. You can do these things for free, and it's kind of fun. I'm not just saying that. But Joshua asked me about this last week or 2 weeks ago, whatever it was.
Yes, I actually just finished like the first. I did this HTML part.
Amazing.
Very fun.
Good. Yes, Jesse.
I was to say I did all of these in college, and they are fun. It's like rewarding when you figure it out.
Amazing. Which ones you do?
I did JavaScript, HTML. I definitely did. I think I did CSS too.
Okay. Nice. I will say, as a disclaimer, Code Academy's website, if you guys ever go through this, they make it seem as if you need to pay for all of these courses. Like they like really force you down their buy funnel. You don't have to pay. Like if you start clicking around into the course material and find the HTML course, it is free. Okay. If you have any issues, ask me. Okay, so let's just talk about HTML real quick. Just the basic structure of a website. Now this is actually in between here. All the content that you see on any website exists between what you would call a body tag. There are other things that exist outside of body tags, but they're kind of like background information. But every single front-facing piece of UI that you've ever interacted with exists between one of these body tags. And all I really want to get out of this here is just to explain that with website code, everything gets nested into elements, right? And this is terminology and language that you guys should become very familiar with. Nested within elements, in particular, if you're doing any sort of like web design stuff, creating a div, which is a section, it's like an element within a website that you can place code into. This is just an important framework to look at. So right here, I can write like another paragraph. That's my name. This is another paragraph, and then what you do is you put the closing tags. That's what like that hash is, and then I can run this. Another paragraph. You could also add other styling stuff here. So like strong is the HTML for bold. So I'm going to close this out. I'll run this again, and that made it bold. So that's as simple as HTML is. This is how all websites are delivered. Now, I'm going through this because when a website is loaded, when a web page loads, the browser, so Google Chrome, right, or Safari or whatever, goes line by line and takes that line of code and spits it onto your web page. So it starts, okay, opening body tag. Okay, this is a header tag, hello world. You print that. Like think of it as if it's like a digital printer printing out one by one lines of code. This is an important thing to understand. And you can make changes to this or have certain interactions change information based on a number of different things. So that's the segue into JavaScript. JavaScript is a coding language that can interact with other languages that can do interesting things with information and interactions and essentially make cool things happen. Video exists on the internet because of a coding language like JavaScript. When you go to Adventure Media's homepage and you scroll down and the things kind of load as you interact with them, or you hover over something and your icon changes, all that happens because of different rules within JavaScript. So within JavaScript, like think of it in terms of like a very basic or a really advanced version of if-else statements. So it's using logic to make changes or do things on web pages based on a predefined set of rules. As you go through Code Academy's JavaScript course, like one of the earlier things is like you use if-else statements to code your own rock, paper, scissors game. So you basically say like, if opponent throws rock, then, and if you throw scissors, then you lose. And you code all the different, there's 9 different outcomes in a game of rock, paper, scissors. So you code that, and then you play the game, and you throw rock, and the other person throws scissors, and you beat them, so on and so forth. So that's kind of the basic of what HTML or what JavaScript is. The important part of JavaScript to get through here is the concept of variables, and this is how we're going to make this segue into UTM parameters. The definition here is probably the best way to describe it. A variable is a container for a value. You can think of variables as a little container for information that live in the computer's memory. Information stored in variables, such as your username, account number, or even personalized greeting, can be found in the memory. So what a variable does is it allows you to pull information through a web experience and store it temporarily or forever. So if you just think about this in terms of like an e-commerce store. When you go and you find a product that you like and you add it to the cart, what's happening there is the back end of the website, maybe Shopify in this example, is pulling value of information through variables. What the product name is, what the product price is, color, size. Those are all individual snippets of information that are being stored as value and being pulled throughout your experience. So you go to the Shopify site, you find a shirt that you like, you put in your size, you add it to your cart. Okay, that shirt costs $50. Now it gets stored in the cart. Now you go find a pair of pants. Here's my size, here's my color, add it to the cart, that costs $50 as well. Price is now being stored and then calculated as you go through the checkout experience. All this is made not just simpler to store this information, but from a basic web design perspective, it also allows the information to be lighter. Because imagine if, going back to this HTML page, every single line, instead of storing information in variables and just basically coding that in the background of our memory, if we just tried to like code a new line for every single bit of information again and again and again and again, every single HTML page on the internet would be 10 times longer than it needs to be. So variables allow us to store information and allows kind of the back end of websites or analytics programs to be a little bit lighter. So here, I just want to give an example. This is one of the things here. So you write a variable, in this case, is, they ask you to declare a variable you call it favorite food. In this case, the way the coding works, it's var equals, you can name this whatever you want, and then you put in the string of what your favorite food is. They told me to put pizza, but pizza happens to be my answer. Number of slices equals 8. And then this is just basically spitting this information onto here. So I'm writing this out and I'm saying this is my favorite food. But what's interesting about this is I could change this to cake. And well, let me get rid of this because it's going to be an issue for me to run this. But now that information can change. This here, let's put this to 9. That information changes as well. So it allows you to be consistent. It allows you to be accurate with the information as you interact with different things across the internet. Okay, so why is this valuable? Well, with advertising, we have a big need for better attribution, and we need to be able to know the results of our campaigns, how users are interacting with our site, and then if people, come click on one ad, they come back, they fill out a form, they give a phone call. We need to be able to store this information somehow and have an idea about what's happening. So that's what essentially UTM parameters allow us to do. So a UTM parameter is basically your own ability to create a variable and store that information for different ad interactions that you set up in any of these accounts. So the most common and standard UTMs, or variables, which are storing information about what's happening in our ad campaigns. The basic one is source medium. So we're going to start there. And what does that mean? Let's go into this account. Let's go to acquisition. Let's go to the all traffic. Let's go to the source medium report. So by default, when you run a Google ad campaign and you run Google search ads, Google Ads and Google Analytics are both owned by Google. So this information parses really well together, because the big thing that we deal with a lot, and this is something that we were in the conference room talking with Greg about before we ate lunch today, is how to map information from one variable into the correct report. And this is where things typically get tricky. But to start with the Google Ads example, is you have some basic information that comes through out of the box. It's called, if you ever heard of Google Ads auto tagging, this is what we mean by this. Out of the box, if you never set up your own custom UTM parameters or never change anything, and you connect your Google Ads account to your Google Analytics account, some of your information is going to be automatically mapped to some of these reports. So for example, source and medium are two of the things that will be mapped. So source report is just a way for Google to say, what was the source platform? Medium is a way that Google determines what is the type of ad or type of way that this person came to the site. And all these things are kind of arbitrary. Like, it doesn't really matter how you or I define source or how you or I define medium, because at a certain level beyond Google Ads auto tagging, this stuff is all customizable. But most of us in the digital marketing space have all agreed that like Google or Facebook or Bing would be a source. Medium would be something like organic or paid or referral traffic, so on and so forth. So oftentimes when people are talking about Google Ads, they go to a source medium report, and by default, this will be mapped into Google Analytics as Google/CPC, where the source is Google and the medium is CPC, which is just how they determine paid ads. The difference here is between Google Organic and Google CPC. So if we were to just look at a source report, those two numbers are going to think of it as like a pivot table. We're going to put all this information together. So this does not necessarily break this down, because that's not the report I'm looking at. Go to medium, we can see this stuff individually. You guys get the idea, right? We can even go and look at a secondary dimension, medium, and this will break it down in this way, depending on how we want to see this information. So Google Organic, GMB, CPC. I think you get the idea. Using this as a standard framework, we can then build on top of it. So a lot of times with Facebook, we will use Facebook as the source, or sometimes we'll even get creative and add Facebook and Instagram as individual sources. Now, the problem with Facebook is that it's not owned by the same company as Google Analytics. So with Facebook, we need to manually set up our UTM parameters. It doesn't come with auto tagging. So how do we do that? So I thought I had this up here, but I guess I don't. Google Analytics URL builder. There's an awesome tool. Just do a Google search for Google Analytics URL builder, and it'll bring you here. What was I doing this for? Mikhail test? I don't know. We were doing this for my book at some point, I guess, and it stored this information. But this allows you to create these custom UTMs that you can then add into your campaigns to help map this data back into Google Analytics. So in this case, I've used my book's URL, and I've manually added my own campaign source. So let's say it was Facebook. Let's say the medium, I wanted to say it's CPC, because I wanted to look at all my paid traffic under the same name. And then this was, I don't know, retargeting campaign. Down here, I would just take this link and I'll paste this into my final URL of my Facebook campaign. And now all this information will be properly mapped into Google Analytics. It'll be stored properly, and when someone clicks on one of those ads, Google Analytics will know to map this under the correct report. The thing about UTM parameters is that they're all these things beyond the question mark. Like this is all just for tracking purposes. So anytime you come to a website and you have this really long, complicated link, everything beyond the question mark it doesn't matter, at least for the user's perspective. So you can change this to just say nothing, or actually nothing, and it'll still bring you to the same place. From a user's perspective, it's the exact same thing. From a marketer's perspective, that's annoying because this person's messing with my tracking. As a side note, if you ever, anyway, Andrew, what's your question?
My question is, I know it means nothing, but when I share an article with someone that I clicked, sometimes the UTMs go, like when I email it or WhatsApp, sometimes you'll see like the UTMs assigned to that. Is that going to double track it? Let's say, for example, I clicked on a CPC Google ad and I was like, oh, this is really cool. And I share it on WhatsApp or text message a friend and they click it again. Does that come as direct or how does that work?
That if the UTMs carry, it won't count as direct. That'll still, so let's say it was this, right? And I clicked on this Facebook ad and it brought me to this page. And then I chatted this to you and you clicked on it, it's going to double count. Which is why, like, this happens a lot with like email sharing, right? So you get a link from an email. That's good news for the people doing the email marketing because they can actually track the virality of that post. Everyone's just trying to take credit for different marketing touch points. So if you can influence your users to go and share that post, and you're getting essentially free impressions every single time someone clicks on it, and now the email marketing team is getting so much more credit than they otherwise would have, that's good for them. So they're going to want that to happen. Which is why, just because I'm cynical and a bad person, I will always strip the URL, the UTM parameters, before I share a link.
So I do the same thing, but I've been seeing a lot of friends that don't work in digital marketing just like copy and paste whatever is on the URL.
Yeah,
it's
also
very long.
So like I judge people based on what's in the UTM parameters. Like it's like, oh, you like subscribe to their email list. It's really telling. I don't know. These are the things that entertain me these days. Okay, so you guys get the basic understanding. So as far as creating this, right? So when we run campaigns across multiple platforms, these things really matter, and it's really important to have a very basic understanding from the very beginning about how you're going to set this up. So if you're using Facebook, you're using StackAdapt, you're using Bing, you want to know how you're going to set up the UTM parameters and not just be figuring it out on the fly. Because like I said before, in Google Analytics, just because we've already agreed that like source is Google, you could really change it if you wanted to or if you made a mistake. Like this stuff, there's a lot of margin for error, and we always run into issues with this. So it's just important to have these things, to have them very clear, especially when you start working with a new client on how you're going to be tracking the UTMs across the board. Google recently, I haven't seen this yet in any accounts, but they announced that they're going to be adding more standard parameters that'll be pulled through on auto tagging, including platform, which I think is really interesting because they don't really give you any guidance as far as what's the difference between source and platform. Because to me, they've always meant the same. It'd be probably Google, right? If you're running a Google display ad and a Google search ad, to me, I've historically always mapped those both as source equals Google. But maybe we'll turn around in 3 years and the digital marketing community will agree that, no, well, we're going to do source equals display or YouTube, but platform equals Google. I'm not really sure. Maybe there's a different way to think about that, but it's something to be aware of as we continue to look at all these different URL parameters. Okay, so I want to talk about like account level tracking and campaign level tracking. There are certain times where the auto tagging that you'll set up in a campaign is not sufficient for a variety of reasons. you might want to pull in, well, let me just pull it up and I'll, actually, this is hilarious. I don't even remember where to get to this. Is it business data? No.
Hey, Patrick, I have a question. So the article you shared about the Google Analytics and Google Ads doing more auto tagging with, let's say, marketing tactic or some of those other, I can't remember, creative asset or something.
Yep.
Like marketing tactic, what's Google going to auto tag for that?
I'm not sure if they will. They might not auto tag. So they don't auto tag. What's this one in here? Campaign content. But you can, and I'll probably get to this when I figure out where the tracking template is in the Google Ads platform. Wow, this is really embarrassing. Can someone remind me where this is? Is it settings? No, that's billing. Brendan, throw me a bone here.
What are you looking for?
I'm looking for the account level tracking template. Shared library?
No, go to campaign settings. Go to like a,
And then you click through from there. See, this is quite embarrassing, but whatever.
So don't go within a campaign if you want to have the account level
yeah.
tracking
Go to all
template.
campaigns on the
So
top
yeah.
left.
Because this one's going to be the campaign level.
Yeah, it's campaign level. So how do we get to account level?
Just go back to all campaign.
Ah,
Yeah, here, and then it's the same process. Yeah,
yeah.
account setting,
Okay,
and then
thank
oh,
you.
good.
Why am I giving this presentation? You guys seem like okay, perfect. So tracking template. So by default, you can override the auto tagging capability. So if I wanted to say for one reason or another that I wanted my source to say, I don't know, search, because that's the way that the client wants to report on it, you can set that up here. Now, the way that you do that is you use parameters like dynamic parameters for the URL tracking. This will allow you to customize the URL at the ad group level and still allow you to properly track everything up above that. So this is an example. We would take, when we say dynamic, of course, that means like it can be fluid depending on how the ad is being served or how the URL is being served. So this squiggly bracket with the LP URL in here, that's just a way to tell Google, pull the ad group level URL, the ad level URL for landing page, and populate it in between these brackets, right? So we're taking this variable that's stored information and we're populating it here. And then we're doing the same here. So now we're creating a variable for campaign ID and we're filling it with the value of whatever the campaign ID is from that ad that was served. Same goes for keyword, right? So we're declaring a value for keyword and we're telling the tracking template inside these squiggly brackets, dynamically populate this with whichever keyword is being served in when that ad gets clicked. Is that clear? Do you guys have any questions about this? Because this could be like the whole end keyword equals keyword thing could totally be confusing, but it's basically a placeholder that just says, I'm declaring a variable and I want you to fill it with this value. Okay. If you find this support doc, setting up tracking with value track parameters, just do a Google search for Google Ads UTM parameters or whatever. This gives you a list here of like those pre-built things that you can just put at the account level to pull this information. So ad group ID, campaign ID, device, keyword, gclid, which is the Google Click ID, which is the unique, I guess we could do a whole second presentation on this, but the Google Click ID is every single ad click on Google, search, display, otherwise, is assigned a unique identifier. That's every single ad click has its own thing, and that's how you do conversion tracking. So keyword, creative, placement. These things will dynamically pull this information through and populate it into your tracking template across the board. So if you really did want to report on device, and make that much easier to break that down in your Google Analytics reporting, or if you're pulling this information through and storing it in a CRM database, then this is how you would do it. However, one thing you'll note here is that campaign name is not one of these pre-built parameters. So if something's not like one of these out-of-the-box value track pre-built parameters, you would have to manually declare that variable on your own. So that's where the campaign level tracking comes into play. So let's say we set this up. I'm not going to save this because I don't want to screw anything up in this account. But let's now pretend that I saved it as is. One of the things that I would have added here is I guess let me put that back in here. I would have declared a variable for campaign name. And we can technically call it whatever we want. We can call it AMG's campaign name. We can just call it campaign name. We can call it campaign. Whatever. You guys get the idea. Call it whatever you want. I'm going to call it campaign name because I like to keep things simple. Campaign name equals, and then we would need to do our own work to fill in this variable. So we're now setting up this as a template. And now at the campaign level, we will need to fill in this value for every single campaign. So this is where things get a little manual. Now let me cancel this, but go back. Cancel. Let's go into this campaign. Let's go into the settings. Additional settings. Value rules. Nope, that's not it. URL, campaign URL options. So we would assume that by default, this would be taking the tracking from the account level, which we had already set up. So we don't have to change anything here. What we do have to change is the custom parameters. So I now have to put the value in here exactly as I've written it at the tracking, the account level tracking template level. So here, by the way, I would have to do underscore. I forgot that before. Sorry, I'm screwing this up. So it would have to be underscore campaign name, my tracking template, and then this is my variable here. And then for this campaign, which is named, you guys get the idea. I'll just take the name of this campaign and I'll drop that into the value. And I've lost where I was going to write this. No. So now, once I save this, every ad click that comes from this campaign will pull this value back and we'll be able to report on this in Google Analytics. Before I proceed, do you guys have any questions? Okay. The last thing I just want to talk about is how this stuff is useful. Because it's not just the Google Analytics thing. The question becomes, beyond Google Analytics, how do you store this information in a CRM database? So if someone goes to a website, they go to a landing page and they fill out a form. They go to Adventure Media's website, they go to the bottom, they go to fill out the form that says, I'm requesting a proposal to hire your company. And we want to pull in that information to say, what was their source medium? What was their campaign name? What was their campaign ID? That happens when, wonder if we have UTM set up. Sorry, this cost Isaac money. What we have here, you see here, source, medium, term. So that's pulling in the keyword Adventure Media. Campaign equals branded. So this stuff should sound familiar to you. There's a bunch of other custom UTMs in here, which is probably set up by mistake. And then somewhere in here, you'll see the Google Click ID. So that's what all this mess of information, yeah, G-Click. So this is unique to that exact same, this is unique to that ad click that I just had. It's going to be different if I did another Google search. Now, if I scroll down here, here, and fill out this information, this form is integrated with our HubSpot database. So we'll be able to see that I filled out this form with this information. But from a tracking perspective, you want to be able to attribute that form submission back to that ad click. So what the average person doesn't realize when they go to fill out a form like this is, in addition to first name, last name, so on and so forth, what's built inside of this form using JavaScript is custom code that will pull variable values from the UTM, or from the URL rather, and assign it to my contact record. So picture for a second a contact record in a CRM database to be like an Excel spreadsheet, where I fill out this form and a new row is going to get populated. It's going to say, Patrick Gilbert, here's my email, here's my phone number. But then there's going to be other information, including campaign name equals branded, source equals Google, medium equals CPC, so on and so forth. Gclid equals that crazy variable that we saw before. And that all happens because there's a JavaScript function happening on the background of this form that when I click this button, it enables an event that will reach up into the URL and pull and extract certain values that have carried through my navigation on the website. And that is not just how we report on things with Google Analytics, but that is how the basic foundation of CRM tracking and offline conversion tracking happens for all of our ads from start to finish. Any questions? Okay. So the last thing I'll do here is I'll just show you guys a little bit on how I would use this information. So I'm in the Google Ads account or Google Analytics account. So some of the things I might look for is the client saying, hey, we're spending a lot of money in StackAdapt. How's that doing? I would say, well, I don't know. Let's see. Let's go into behavior, and let's go into site content, or let's go to behavior overflow. So we're looking at some average information here, right? But hang on, all pages. I say, okay, cool. Here's the most popular page, claims, but I want to add a secondary dimension where I can drill down at the source medium. Now I'm looking at source medium. Now I might want to filter by StackAdapt. And now I can see that over the last 7 days, inside this offer, there's been 3 users. I don't know why it's saying source medium this. This is a bad example. You guys get the idea. This is how you start to drill down and figure out information about how your actual campaign performance is doing. So earlier on a call today, we were on with and asked the question about how these new, how the increase in performance or the increase in spend that we've had on Google is if we have any sort of data behind that. So I quickly came into Google Analytics. We don't have any revenue data yet because we only increased spend over the last 3 days. But I quickly went into Google CPC and then pulled, or rather I went to the behavior report and I looked at the time on site and pages per session, just some basic engagement rates. And I did a filter for source medium equals Google CPC and showed the client that there was an increase in pages per session and other engagement rate over the last couple of days, which indicates that we're attracting a higher quality audience. So these are just like some small bits of data that you can quickly filter for and go back to the client and talk about, thanks to the fact that all this information was set up back to the UTM parameters. So I'm gonna wrap it up. Do you guys have any final questions, thoughts? Did I actually answer any of your questions or provide any value whatsoever? I will take that as a maybe.
I have a question.
Yes.
First of all, thank you very much. This is great. Do we have any thoughts? So usually we go with auto tagging, but can you give like the top reasons why people would do the manual tagging a little bit more? Like, is
Yeah,
it
very like
this across different platforms?
it's typically when there's another analytics team that's working on the back end to source information in a way that's just it. Let me put it this way: if an analytics team was put in place on the client side that existed before they were running ads on Google, they probably have their own way of tracking information and reporting to like their senior leadership, and the Google ads like auto tagging might not fit into that paradigm. So that's what we're seeing with, for example. Or we might have a different reason to do it because we're pulling some custom reports in Tableau and we're trying to break things out by audience instead of campaign name. So for certain reasons, we're changing some of the, or we're still using auto tagging to a degree. We're just adding additional variables on top of it to pull through. Like you can set up that account level tracking template to include the basic auto tagging parameters. You don't have to override source medium. So you can still have that come through, but you can also have a custom parameter for device or audience.
So you
with
would
like,
still have to do the campaign level. Can you keep the account auto tagging and then just have your additional parameters that you want at the campaign
Yes.
level?
Yep. Yeah, there's to be totally honest, there's very few times where you're going to not be using auto tagging. There are times though, especially now with the way that we're setting up our Tableau reports, that you'll create auto tagging, or sorry, you'll create a template that sits on top of the auto tagging to pull more information. So let's say, for example, that instead of campaign name, because some of our campaign names are really long and complicated. Let's say, like this comes up all the time of like, oh, I wonder when this campaign started. Like theoretically, you could create a value at the campaign level for start date. And now it's just called like start date. So in Google Analytics, you can create a secondary dimension and sort by like campaigns that started by a certain day.
How would
Or
you do? Oh, you just put in the date. Like
you would have to like manually put in the date as you set that up. Or like let's say you and I were running an account together and we were competing. And we wanted to put in whoever started, whoever like owned that campaign. And instead of putting that in the name, we would create a separate variable that said like Patrick's campaign. And now you can create a custom report in Google Analytics for all of Patrick's campaigns and aggregate that data under that variable.
Got it.
So it really depends on like, again, it always comes back to like what questions you're trying to answer. But if you kind of take a couple steps back and say like, what is the way that we should be reporting on this? So like right now, and I'll give you the example with Assurant and APC, is they're trying to get this audience information. They've boiled it down to 3 different types of audience segments we have to report on. So theoretically, if we were just starting this today, we would just create the campaign names that include the audience name, whether it's warm lead, house list, whatever. And then that would be very simple. But unfortunately, the way that they're classifying this information has changed multiple times. So what we've had to do now is create custom UTM like mapping rules that come back to the UTM parameters and how we're pulling things into Tableau that make it a little more complicated, but it still makes it possible. And that's all that matters. But I think the reason I started with the JavaScript example is like once you kind of play around with that and understand how that logic works, I think that we can solve a higher level of complicated problems with tracking and so on and so forth, because you can kind of think about how you might be using UTMs in a different way to track different bits of information.
Makes sense. I have one more question.
Yeah.
It actually came up recently. So this client has a form on their site, someone registers. So you would think that the CRM would the form would be directly linked with their CRM, but it wasn't. And they were like, we don't know where these leads are going. And it's like, oh, well, I thought you were supposed to do that. But we can push the UTM source, UTM medium, UTM whatever, along with whatever will get them the leads. But the question is, should we have, even before we started and launched anything, in every scenario, do you have to push the hidden fields of like UTM source, UTM medium, so that they could know? Or is it not as important and not something you should be doing until they mention it? Maybe it's like not a great question, but it's just
it's tough. I mean, I would never really recommend like spending a lot of money if you don't have proper tracking in place. But like some of our largest clients right now don't have the ability to track. Like we're only just now setting up call tracking because like they just haven't been able to get it running at this point. So you have to use your judgment as far as like, okay, like we can't wait any longer. We have to get ads off our ground. And in the meantime, we have to use our best judgment as far as like what's working. So I would definitely recommend that. But the first thing to figure out is like, are they getting the lead information? Like, are they at least getting like phone number?
They're getting it's registered, but it wasn't going to like their email marketing list that they wanted. So we'll probably have to set up, I don't know, their developer quit, so it's all fine. But besides that, like, I guess my question is, right, like we have the form fill, but is it necessary to, before launching, or at least to something to consider, to get that script to push all the UTM source, UTM medium, I don't know, campaign? Like, do most clients want that? It's not as necessary. Will they get that anyways through like the URL?
No, they won't get it automatically. You won't get it pulled back into your CRM system unless you set up that hidden field and create whatever that snippet of code is that pulls that information.
So I feel like it's a question we should be asking clients at the beginning.
Yeah. And also, like, how many leads are we talking?
Right.
Because if it's, hey, we get 3 leads a day, okay, well, because all reporting has 2 sides of it. There's reporting and attribution. So like, hey, do we know if this money was well spent? But then there's also the machine learning component and getting that data of like, oh, this was a quality lead or this closed into a sale, and feeding the machine. But if you're only dealing with 1 to 3 good leads a day, that's not really going to make a difference. But if you're dealing with a ton of leads, then that's going to make a much bigger difference. Mikhail just sent a link to.
Yeah, it's just if one day you want to like capture the gclead or the UTM in any form submission, that could be helpful.
Oh, love this. Oh, so here's a script in here. This is the script that creates the cookie. Okay, so this is good. So, okay, wait. I'm still recording, right? This is really great information. Great find, Mikhail. So on this link, Google this if you're watching this years from now. This is a really nice visual. How to set this up. So what this will do, oh, here's an example of type code. So we need to figure out exactly what we need to be customized here. But part of this information, like let's say you click on an ad and you go to Adventure Media's homepage, and then you click over to the services page and you fill out that form. In a lot of websites, that UTM information is not going to automatically carry through. So you need to preserve it in a cookie on the user's browser as they navigate throughout the site, so that you can be sure that when they fill out that information, that hidden field from the form will be able to pull that information through. So I believe what this code I'm looking at creates a cookie and pulls the gclid and probably other information as well that I'm not totally clear about. Date, time, I guess that's important. But basically saying, like, preserve this information. So it doesn't matter if this user converts now or at any point in the next 30 days or whatever, this information will actually be passed through. So that's really important. Add the hidden field to your form. This is a great link.
There's another one that I just shared. Maybe it's better. It's from GitHub. It's
Excellent. So what's this?
I don't know much about coding, but
Yeah, this to me is more intimidating. Okay. Good stuff. All right. Anything else? Thanks
Thank
for
you.
keeping me about UTMs. All right. Thanks, guys. See ya.